Hey, this is Henry Sands with another episode of Real Talk for our Monday update from our good friend Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. We want to thank our sponsors at Park Bank. Thank you for everything that they're doing, especially at this time. We really thank you for the investment in what we're doing. Mr. Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, how are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. All things considered, doing all right. Just trying to stay the course. How about yourself?
I'm good. I see you Rick Ross in the game growing the beard out, huh?
Oh, this is my isolation beard. I didn't necessarily start growing it, but I decided to not cut it once this whole safer home thing started. So we'll see when I do the big chop.
It's a good look, though. It looks good. Contrast to the bald head, the beard. It's a good look.
I've done it before a few times.
Yeah. So a lot has happened since we last spoken. One, there was a protest on Friday at the Capitol, and a lot of people showed up. So what's your first overall take of the protest that happened? And then why weren't people arrested? If they didn't have a permit, how could they do that without being arrested?
Yeah, some people did decide to gather at the Capitol after being denied a permit. One, putting their own health at risk, putting the health and safety at risk of other people, and also, everybody else, in the vicinity, because the safer home order is in place for a reason, and it's unfortunate and very selfish that people decided that they wanted to, protest these orders as if they are the only ones impacted. It's a very individualistic mindset, and it also speaks to a certain amount of privilege, because there are people who've been struggling for a long time, way before COVID-19 even hit the state and hit the country, people whose lives have been tremendously impacted, but they understand that this is about more than themselves. That reality hasn't translated to everyone. There are still some people who are stuck in the I, me, mine mindset. And also, let's not ignore the fact that the real challenges that folks in our state and country are dealing with are being exploited by a lot of right-wing billionaires. This wasn't just a protest. This wasn't necessarily a protest against the safer home order. This was a Trump rally. There were militia groups who were involved in this protest. There was so much other than COVID-19 that was even being, talked about at this rally, and it wasn't productive in the sense that they brought solutions to the table. It wasn't them saying, well, let's figure out how we can keep communities safe while at the same time restarting the economy. It was all about how can I get mine? And, that's because that movement was co-opted. It played off of real pain that people are dealing with. And that's the same way that Donald Trump's candidacy operated in 2015 and 2016. And that's the same way he became president. And that's the same way that he governs. So there was a Trump rally here at the state capitol on Friday. And, I share your frustration about the fact that them being denied a permit and not being arrested. And that goes to my earlier point about privilege.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not one to talk about race and make race a big issue on everything. However, just history shows us that
if it was just me and you out there, out there on Friday,
you know where I'm going.
We'd have
been locked up. I mean, if that was 500 people, 1,000 of them, and then we had guns, even if there were, if we had permits to have the guns, that would have been ugly quick. So it's just, it kind of reeks of hypocrisy at its best, right? So I'm just curious of what we can do in the future. And if people want to protest, let them protest. I do think, though, you're right, that people sort of are going up for their own interests. Like for me, I have a son that's Down syndrome, right? A kid, one of my twins has Down syndrome. So he's really vulnerable to this virus, right? So I have to do things. So the other thing about those type of people in our community that are dealing with this coronavirus too. So switching from that, I know Saturday.
Well, if I could just go back to even just go back to one piece, because I mean, you got people talking about tyranny, folks who who've never even experienced any sort of oppression, and you got people also who stepped out there, and it's like the same folks who a lot of people who've never known consequence for their actions. Right. Those are the people, unfortunately, that see an opening in this kind of atmosphere to further their own agenda. People, again, like I said, that haven't had to deal with, being responsible for actions, and their actions could, beyond just denying beyond just going out there and protesting despite being denied a permit, but literally putting people's lives at risk, if not their own.
Well, let's flip it. Let me ask a question from their perspective, right? One, they're saying, hey, look, the economy is shut down. This is hurting people's lives. Yes, we're losing lives, but big picture, you guys, the government's overplaying it. The far left's overplaying it. We might lose some lives, but overall the economy is more important. We want to be able. You don't have the right. The government does not have the right to tell us if we can stay home. You don't have the right to do that. We fought for our rights to be able to do what we want to do when we want to do it. And yes, I have my gun with me as a symbolic gesture to show you that we are America, we built America, and we have the right for these freedoms. What do you say to them?
Well, that's the thing, too. Sure. But the fact is, people are losing their lives. And although the people who are losing their lives at a disproportionate rate did not look like the people who were protesting on Friday, does not mean that lives have been lost. And it's the ignoring of the pain and suffering in communities that always deal with pain and suffering the most. That's the most frustrating about this. It's the most abhorrent part of that sort of thing.
Yeah. So the governor is talking about you guys call it the Badger Bounce Back. And what does that, do you guys have an idea of what that kind of looks like for the Badger Bounce Back, and how fast can Bucky bounce back?
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, you know what? I just thought about another point too, man. Especially in this country too, because they talk about Constitution. People want to bring guns and reopening the economy despite the loss of black and brown lives. I mean, the economy, this country was built on black lives and built on the backs of black lives, built on the loss of black life and the servitude of black lives. And to say that we should restart the economy despite the fact that black and brown lives are being lost, it just follows a long trend of ideas and thought processes of way too many people in this country. So sorry about that. But back to the Badger Bounce Back plan. There is a strategy that we want to employ when it comes to reopening the state, and it's. The people that were out there protesting too, talked about a plan, but they didn't protest the fact that the president, the plan from the White House, our plan virtually mimicked the White House's plan. And I don't know if I'll ever have a chance to say that the plan that we have is basically in line with that of the White House. And so for the first time and maybe ever, and maybe the last time, we'll get to say that we have a plan that sort of mirrors the White House's plan. It means that we have to have necessary testing capacity. It means that we have to have capacity for contact tracing, meaning that we can get back to the source to hopefully curb the spread of COVID-19. And also, it means that there is a plan in place for sanitation, making sure people employ best practices, and we are seeing a downward trend. But we're not seeing that downward trend. Over the last couple of days, we had some of the largest single-day spikes since the pandemic hit the state of Wisconsin. One day with over 300 people contracting COVID-19. We're just under 6,000 deaths. It may be over that at this point, or excuse me, not deaths, just under 6,000 positive cases. We probably are over 6,000 now. And the death rate prior to the last press conference was 272. You look at Green Bay, where they had the outbreak at the meat processing plant. That doesn't show us that things are getting better just yet. We were showing signs of flattening the curve. However, when you have these one-offs, like what happened at the meat processing plant, chances are you're going to see another viral spread. So until we get to a point where we're on the downward slope, we can't employ the Badger Bounce Back plan. But I am looking forward to the day And people, people say, for those that say it's a left-wing hoax, do they realize that the DNC was going to be in Milwaukee this year in July, and they got pushed back? And who knows what that's even going to look like in August? It definitely won't be what it's going to be in July. This is not some left-wing hoax. There are things that we're missing out on. We're going to nominate the next president of the United States of America at our convention, and to have that pushed back, I had a marathon I signed up for this month. I couldn't even run. And, people's lives are being inconvenienced in so many ways. I even just threw that marathon out there because that was just a leisure thing, a fun thing I wanted to do. But not to mention the actual business that needs to be handled. The people whose lives are being impacted that, we can't even be there in person to support. Folks who've lost their lives, there are at least 3 funerals that would have happened. I couldn't even attend because of the restrictions, because I'm not a close family member. I would never be one of the 10 people to attend that homegoing ceremony when they're, close relatives in that place that I would, be essentially taking their position. This is real life, man. And, to just call it some hoax is very scary business, especially when you have the president out there talking about injecting disinfectant to kill the virus, right? Like that, like the type of thinking that we're dealing with is beyond frustrating because it shows a lack of understanding.
Do you think that for the Badger bounce back, I'm even having a hard time figuring out how you can even get a grasp of it? Because like you said, Saturday we had the biggest one-day cases for the state of the state of Wisconsin, and then the next 2 days it got lower again. But that one breakout caused a big influx of cases. So that can happen at all times. So just think if you opened up a school or something, and that could happen. Like, how do you know when the right time to do something like that? It's just a really difficult situation.
It's a very difficult situation. And you also had like the spike in post-election day, and people say, and I saw this on Twitter. I try not to jump in I'd never jump in the comments, but I try not to read all the comments just because Twitter is just full of bots and trolls these days, automated generated messages. And I saw one thing where that I shared that talked about the number. Or actually, I talked on CNN about the number of cases in Milwaukee County that were related to the election. And like some of the replies were, there was no change in the rate. Well, there's a difference in the rate in the total number of infections. Like if 40 people can trace their infection to election day, of course, if we have 5,000 or 6,000 cases in the state, that won't change the rate of transmission, but the overall number and the 40 people, that's 2 different things. The 40 people, the statewide rate will be relatively unchanged, but that number of 40 people who should not have coronavirus, and also the people who they associate with, who are now at risk and who are at danger or who are in danger because the election went forward, that's it's maddening. Like the more I talk about this stuff, I think the more angry I get about it. And I try to think about like the best way that I can convey these messages or speak very plainly about what we're dealing with. And I wish that, we had more leadership from the White House. I wish that, the president had taken this more seriously. I was just looking at New Zealand and even Italy, Italy was the worst off for a really long time. And they are starting to reopen parts of their economy. But, people say, well, everybody else is starting to open. Well, that's because they did what they needed to do sooner. In Italy, they waited for a while, but then they took extreme measures, and now they see the rates of transmission decrease. You look at New Zealand, where it's virtually 0 right now, and they are starting to open up certain parts of the country. Large gatherings are still banned at the moment, but that's because they got out in front of it. It took proactive measures to get them to a place where they can get back to normal sooner. We didn't take those proactive measures because you got a whole lot of folks who aren't necessarily concerned with the loss of life in pursuit of dollar.
Ironically, the people are protesting who want to open up the economy. The more they gather, have these big events, the more they're going to slow down the economy being able be back open, right? I mean, that's
man, like you've been to church before. Like I keep saying, the sooner we get in, the sooner we get out. And these folks, they just want to do they want to keep doing things that's going to make it tougher for everybody.
Yeah. So right now, because of Green Bay, I think half of the population up there got this was the coronavirus with our Latinx friends, and I think statewide it's about 25% of the population who have it are Latinx, and the other like 24% African American. I might be opposite, 25% African American, 24% Latinx. But anyways, that's a big part of the population that has this for people of color. Do you think that have you and the governor ever have talked about having some type of task force or something after this to assess what we can be doing, even now, real time, to address these communities in real time to help?
Yeah, no, I think that I think it's important to look at that. And I know that we were in the process before this even happened, in the process of formalizing our Health Equity Council that would have been able to address what's going on in a more appropriate way. And let's talk about that disparity, too, because you talk about the percentage of positive cases being the Latinx community, being the Black community. And let's also mention the percent of the total population, 6%. So we're talking about a 4-time disparity. If 6% of the population over, about 25+% of the transmissions, that means that we're represented, each group is represented 4 times as much in the positive test cases. And that's why people feel comfortable marching and protesting this, because it's not necessarily impacting them. And they think that, it just follows, it just follows along the long idea, the notion that, these lives aren't as important as other lives.
I hope that's not true, right? My optimistic side.
I hope it's not too. I hope it's not too. But it's easy to see something not impacting you, the people around you, your friends, your family, and think that everything is okay because it doesn't deal with you. Like I'm not a person who lives in poverty. Poverty still matters to me. It's important because it affects the overall health of our population. It affects our overall economy if people are living in poverty. I don't have explicit immigrant roots. I'm not, for the generations that I can track have all been born here in America. However, immigration is an issue that matters to me. It's an issue of importance to me. I'm not a member of the LGBTQ community, but that matters to me because these are lives that are in our society. These are people among us who are being marginalized, and there's no way society should be able or can effectively continue to move forward if we continue to ignore the lives of people who've dealt with the worst. Who've dealt with the worst set of circumstances. And I just hate the fact that people just continue to go about their lives and have this outrage, while the outrage should be focused at the fact that people are dying at this disproportionate rate.
Yeah, really what this comes down to is people of life versus the economy, life versus caring about others versus your own life. And it really comes down to that, which you would think is a core of America's values, as it should be anyways. So Green Bay, Brown County, is like now in the state, the second highest in the whole state where we have the most coronavirus episodes. So what do we have a strategy for deal with Green Bay now? I mean, I think they have about 847 cases up there or something like that.
Yeah. It's always been the Department of Health and the administration's goal to deploy resources where they are needed the most, where we see outbreaks. And now that Brown County has become a hotbed, we will see more resources being deployed to Brown County.
Do you think, coming back for the convention, do you think the convention, because you mentioned the convention, which is true, it's right around the corner, do you think that the convention will actually happen? I mean,
I don't know who's going to feel comfortable going to convention. And I was on a podcast a couple of weeks ago. I said, ask Joe Biden, because Joe Biden was spilling all the beans at first. He's the first one that said we may go towards a virtual convention. And I hear folks on TV, on radio, on podcasts also. They talk about how they looked forward to coming to Milwaukee and probably don't see themselves doing that now. And think about like concerts, think about any other sort of gathering. Like even if these activities were allowed, who's actually going to show up?
Right. Yeah. Well, you have a tough job right now, and thank you for all that you're doing, Lieutenant Governor. Is there any final words you want to leave our viewers for the day until we meet with you next time?
Not right now. I'll say, last time I forgot to talk about the babyface.
Oh, Teddy Riley.
Babyface and Teddy Riley. That battle. I guess they did it over again, but if you can catch,
did you watch it? Did you watch it?
I didn't, man. I didn't end up catching it.
So for our viewers, our viewers will know this. Teddy Riley, and some viewers might not know who Teddy Riley is, and most people know what Babyface is probably. So this was on Instagram, right? They're gonna have some competition on Instagram, seeing who had the best music, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And
that's the thing. Also, go ahead.
I have to go check that out.
Yeah, man. Teddy Riley had a lot of hits too, man. People forget about the work he did with Michael Jackson, man. Teddy Riley is one of those just behind the scenes guy. Like, people know him from Blackstreet, but they don't know his whole catalog, which is very impressive.
And
Babyface too, man. Yeah, and Guy. I mean, but like even Babyface worked with Fall Out Boy, right? Like, Babyface has had a very extensive career.
Yeah. Oh, so what are you watching on Netflix? What you watching now?
Oh man, I finished Arrested Development finally, and I am. It's not even much Netflix now. I'm catching back up to The Last Dance. I watched I watched 2 episodes yesterday, but I missed the first 2. I DVR'd the first 2. I got to go back and watch those.
So it's Jordan or LeBron. Who's the best?
I mean, it just depends on where you grew up, man. It just depends on where you grew up. Like, I grew up in the Jordan era, so I'm gonna say Michael Jordan. However, if you put LeBron James in that era, LeBron James probably would have been the best player, right? The game just evolved so much, the game evolved so much. Like, think about people now, like, Richard Sherman. He had his time in the NFL. Like, he was a good player. He got hurt, not where he was. But if Richard Sherman was playing in Deion Sanders' era, Richard Sherman would have been the person. He would have been the iconic player.
Well, I disagree.
The iconic defensive back, I should say.
I disagree.
You disagree?
Yeah, I disagree. I disagree with that. But like Sherman, I love Sherman, but Deion was one of
Richard Sherman as an example, but I get it. Deion Sanders was a force. Like, I'm not taking anything away from Deion Sanders at all. However,
I hear you. I hear you. You're getting a very political answer. This is the first political answer I've heard you give, Lieutenant Governor. And I mean, you're usually shooting right down the middle. Comparing LeBron to Jordan is like comparing, I don't know. I don't want to be political. So,
that's not true, man. That's not true. That's not true.
Yeah. Jordan's clearly better than LeBron. But hey, I get it.
Wow.
Every generation needs to have their hero. LeBron is someone who is. I get it. It's not how you won the ring. He got the rings. He still don't have as many rings as Jordan, but he got some. I got it. I get it. Totally get it. I get it. So all right. We were cool before you got that.
The competition is different too right now than it was in Georgia. And and if you watched Last Dance last night, you saw how Detroit was just beating up people basically on the court. You saw it. Bill and Vera was out there two-piecing folks. Right? It was a rough game, man. Don't get me wrong, but like the level of competition is different right now, though.
Yep, I agree with that. Yeah, I think it is different. I think the game's a lot friendlier to people like LeBron, right? LeBron would have had a harder time back then. But anyway, I get it. You gave me a political answer, Lieutenant Governor. You said Jordan, but then you gave me the half. Well, that's okay. That's good. I still love you, man. I still wish you the best in that role, even though it's clearly Jordan. It's just clearly Jordan.
Jordan is the classic player. LeBron is the new age player. All right, think about like a '64 Camaro or something. It's a classic car. But you think of the 2021 Camaro, it's a car with much more capability, man. Like that's the thing. It just the evolution.
Wow. Okay, I within this conversation, what I think you just said was LeBron is a more evolved player than Jordan. I think that's what you just said.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Look how this dude is built. That's exactly what I'm saying.
That is absolutely crazy. That is
not crazy. That is not crazy. Compare like the figures. Like LeBron is like a freak of nature. Like nope. There aren't a lot of people who were born like as physically gifted as LeBron right now. Like,
I agree.
It's just different.
I agree with that. I call him like he's like Dominique Wilkins to me. I mean, that's what he's. Anyways, okay, we'll have this conversation offline. We don't have to have this on a real talk, but just want you guys to know, I love you, Lieutenant Governor, but he's wrong on this. It's clearly Jordan. LeBron is not the evolved version of Jordan. I mean, come on.
Okay.
Really. Okay, but hey, thanks again, Lieutenant Governor. Thanks for all you're doing. Sincerely, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for taking time with us, and we'll hopefully see you next week. And stay safe and healthy. See you next time, Real Talk.